Every predator has a hunting ground, but the most terrifying ones don't just hunt. They follow a script. They stick to a blueprint that's been carefully designed to select, isolate, and dominate their prey. For most of us, it's the stuff of nightmares. For them, it's a playbook, a step-by-step manual that turns a person into the most efficient predator you can imagine. We're about to open that playbook to dissect the terrifyingly calculated process that defines their deadly game. From the subtle tactics they use to stalk and lure their victims, to the almost superhuman effort they put into covering their tracks. This is an inside look at the mind of a killer and the playbook that guides them. Let's be clear. This isn't about celebrating darkness. It's about examining it. We're trying to understand the mechanics of evil, to deconstruct the process that lets these people walk among us, often unseen and unsuspected. Until it's far too late, we'll dig into the psychology that writes the script, the methods that bring it to life, and the critical mistakes that, thankfully, can bring the whole production crashing down. Understanding this playbook isn't about creating fear. It's about arming ourselves with knowledge, because the first step to stopping a monster is understanding exactly how it hunts. Before a single page of the playbook is turned, the architect has to exist. In the world of criminal psychology, pioneered by the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit back in the 70s, a critical distinction was made that changed everything. It's the difference between a crime of passion and a campaign of terror. It's the difference between the disorganized and the organized offender. A disorganized killer is a creature of impulse. Their crimes are chaotic, frenzied, and opportunistic. The crime scene is a mess. The weapon is usually whatever's handy, and the act itself is a sudden blitz attack. They're often socially awkward, can't hold down a job, and may be living in a state of mental distress. But the organized killer, that's a different species entirely. They are the authors of the playbook. These individuals are defined by their careful planning and chilling self-control. They aren't insane in the legal sense. A key trait is that they know right from wrong. They just don't care. They're often of average or above average intelligence, socially competent, and can maintain the mask of a normal life with jobs, families, and friends. Think of Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy, men seen by their communities as charming and kind, all while hiding the darkest secrets. This normalcy is their greatest weapon. It's the camouflage that lets them get close. So what drives someone to create such a horrifying script? The answer often lies in a toxic cocktail of psychological traits known as the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Narcissism provides the ego, the belief that they're special and entitled to whatever they want. Psychopathy provides the chilling lack of empathy, the emotional void that lets them see other people not as human beings, but as objects, props in their own twisted drama. And Machiavellianism provides the manipulative, cynical worldview, the willingness to deceive and exploit anyone for personal gain. When these traits combine, they create a personality that isn't just capable of profound harm, but is psychologically driven to seek it. But it's not always so simple. For some, the why is also rooted in deep-seated trauma or a twisted need for revenge, creating an even more complex and volatile mix of motivations. Still, the core driver that powers the playbook is almost always an insatiable need for power and control. The murder itself is often secondary. The real gratification comes from the process, the stalking, the planning, the abduction, the domination. The kill is just the final, irreversible expression of their ultimate power over another human life. This whole process starts in the mind. Long before they pick a victim, they engage in elaborate, obsessive fantasies. They rehearse the crime again and again, refining the details and scripting the encounter. This fantasy life isn't an escape from reality. It's a blueprint for it. The playbook is just the physical manifestation of these violent fantasies. They aren't just committing a crime, they're directing a gruesome play where they are the star and the victim has been cast in a role they never auditioned for. The playbook, a step-by-step breakdown. The playbook of an organized killer is a structured, cyclical process. It's a campaign, not a single battle, with clear phases designed to maximize the killer's psychological payoff while minimizing their risk. While every predator has their own unique style, the core structure is terrifyingly consistent. We can break it down into 4 main phases: the hunt, the con, the act, and the aftermath. Phase 1. The hunt, victim selection and surveillance. The organized killer doesn't choose victims at random. This is a careful, almost obsessive, selection process. They often have what profilers call a victim avatar, a specific profile of traits they're looking for. This could be based on appearance, like Ted Bundy's preference for young women with long dark hair parted in the middle. A specific occupation, like the Green River Killer's targeting of sex workers, or just a sense of vulnerability. They're hunting for a person who fits neatly into their pre-existing fantasy. Once the type is set, the hunt begins. This is the stalking phase, and it's a crucial part of the ritual. This is where they start to exert control, often from a distance. The organized killer is patient. They'll watch a potential victim for days, weeks, or even longer. They learn their routines, where they work, where they shop, the routes they take home. They're identifying points of vulnerability, the moment the victim is most alone and least likely to be missed. Take Dennis Rader, the BTK, bind, torture, kill killer. Rader called his potential victims projects. He would stalk them meticulously, gathering info and drawing up detailed plans. He'd even break into their homes beforehand to learn the layout and cut the phone lines. This wasn't just practical planning, it was part of the psychological buildup. The surveillance phase lets the killer feel a sense of ownership over the victim long before any contact is made. And today, that surveillance has gone digital. A killer can learn a shocking amount about a person from social media, tracking check-ins, identifying friends, and learning personal habits without ever leaving home. This digital stalking adds another layer of detached, predatory observation to their arsenal. The key is finding that perfect intersection of victim type and opportunity. They are risk-averse and looking for the path of least resistance, waiting for the perfect moment to execute the next phase of the playbook. Phase 2. The con, the lure, and the trap. Once a victim is selected and their weak spots are identified, the killer moves to the next, and maybe the most deceptive phase, the lure. This is where their social skills and manipulative nature become deadly weapons. They rarely use a blitz attack. Instead, they engineer a situation to gain the victim's trust, getting them to willingly lower their guard. This is the con. The con can take many forms, each designed to exploit human decency. The most infamous example is, of course, Ted Bundy. Handsome and charismatic, Bundy would often wear a fake cast on his arm or leg, using crutches. He'd approach his victim in a public place, looking harmless, and ask for help carrying something to his Volkswagen Beetle. It was a brilliant, predatory trick. By faking an injury, he made his victims feel like they were in control. Once they were at his car, the trap was sprung. John Wayne Gacy, another master of the con, used different tricks. As a local contractor and popular party clown, he was a trusted figure. He'd lure young men to his home with promises of construction work, or by impersonating a police officer with a fake badge, using his community standing to create a false sense of security. The whole point of the con is to move the victim from a public space, where the killer has little control, to a location of their choosing, where they have total control. This is the trap, and it's been just as carefully prepared as the victim. An organized killer almost never commits the murder at the abduction site. Too many variables, too many witnesses. Instead, they transport the victim to a secondary location. This kill kit location could be their home, a secluded spot they've scouted, or a prepared vehicle. Israel Keyes was famous for his kill kits. He would bury buckets filled with weapons, restraints, and tools for body disposal in remote spots across the country, sometimes years before he'd return to use them. This level of planning shows just how committed they are to their script. Jeffrey Dahmer also perfected the trap, luring young men from bars back to his apartment, a space where he had absolute control. The lure and the trap work together. The con neutralizes the victim's defenses, and the trap eliminates any chance of escape. Phase 3. The act, control, and the crime. Once the victim is in the trap, the killer's primary need takes center stage: total dominance. The act itself is less about the speed of the kill and more about the process. This is the part of the fantasy they've been waiting to play out, a gruesome script rehearsed in their mind 1,000 times. Control is maintained through restraints, ropes, handcuffs, tape, and through psychological torment. The killer wants to inspire fear, as this amplifies their own sense of power. The act can be prolonged for hours, even days, as they savor this ultimate expression of control. The choice of weapon is also telling. An organized killer brings their tools with them. They also tend to avoid firearms. A gun is loud and messy. More importantly, for the killer's psychology, it's impersonal. They often prefer hands-on methods, like strangulation or stabbing. These require close contact, letting the killer feel the last moments of their victim's life, the ultimate display of their power, and they are keenly aware of forensics. They'll often wear gloves. They might force the victim to shower to wash away trace evidence. They are methodical even in their violence, trying to minimize the forensic trail. After the murder, some killers engage in what's known as a signature, something that isn't necessary for the crime, but fulfills a deep psychological need. This could be posing the body, performing post-mortem acts, or taking a trophy. A signature is the killer's personal stamp on the crime, a ritual unique to their private fantasies. Dennis Rader's signature was right in his name: bind, torture, kill. The process was central to his gratification. Phase 4. The aftermath, the cover-up and post-crime behavior. For the organized killer, the playbook doesn't end with the victim's last breath. The aftermath is just as critical and rehearsed. This phase is all about evading capture and psychologically reliving the crime. First, the cover-up. An organized killer understands the body is the single most important piece of evidence. They'll often transport it to a third location, a remote, pre-selected dump site, far from both the abduction and kill sites. This creates multiple crime scenes, making the investigation exponentially harder. They'll bury the body, sink it in water, or dismember it to prevent identification. The goal is to delay discovery for as long as possible. They'll also clean the primary crime scene, wiping surfaces and disposing of weapons. But even the most careful killer can make mistakes. As forensic experts will tell you, it's virtually impossible to erase every single trace. A hair, a fiber, a microscopic drop of blood can be their undoing. With the physical evidence handled, the killer moves on to the psychological aftermath. They often take souvenirs or trophies, a piece of jewelry, a driver's license, something to help them remember the crime. These trophies allow them to relive the feeling of power long after the event is over. Another hallmark is their keen interest in their own investigation. They'll closely follow the media coverage, sometimes with a sense of pride. It feeds their ego and lets them know how close the police are. Some take it a step further and insert themselves into the investigation. They might call the police with tips, send letters to the media, or even show up at their victims' vigils. Dennis Rader taunted police and media for decades with letters, a behavior driven by a narcissistic need for recognition. He wanted credit for his work. It's a high-risk move, driven by ego, and as we'll see, it's often the key to their downfall. The playbook is not foolproof. Every script has a flaw, and every predator can make a fatal mistake. So, how does it all fall apart? Often, it's because the very traits that make them killers also make them sloppy. Their arrogance, their narcissistic need for attention, and their escalating risk-taking. With each successful crime, a killer's confidence can grow into a sense of invincibility. They start to believe they're smarter than everyone else and can't be caught. This leads to complacency. They get sloppy with the cleanup. They take bigger risks. Ted Bundy, one of the most organized killers in history, grew increasingly bold. His capture wasn't from one big mistake, but a series of smaller, arrogant ones, ending with him being pulled over for reckless driving in a stolen car full of incriminating evidence. His belief that he could outsmart anyone made him careless. The need to relive the crime can also be their undoing. John Wayne Gacy's downfall was linked to items he took from a victim, which were later found in his home. The need to keep those mementos, those physical links to his power, pointed the finger right at him. But the most classic example of a playbook unraveling due to ego is Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. After years of silence, Rader reappeared in 2004, taunting the media and police again. He was driven by pure narcissism. He was angry his legacy was being forgotten. In a letter, he asked police if he could send them a floppy disk without being traced. Incredibly, the police, using a coded newspaper ad, told him it would be safe. Rader sent the disk. On it, forensic analysts found metadata in a deleted Word document that pointed to Christ Lutheran Church and was last modified by someone named Dennis. That single ego-driven act led police right to Dennis Rader, the church council president. And then there's the one thing they can't plan for the future. Advances in forensic science, especially DNA technology, have become the bane of killers who thought they got away clean. Joseph James DeAngelo, the Golden State Killer, was finally caught in 2018, decades after his crimes, when investigators used genetic genealogy, uploading crime scene DNA to a public database and finding a relative. His playbook was perfect for its time, but it couldn't outsmart science. Their arrogance makes them predictable. Their need for control makes them take risks. The playbook, designed to give them ultimate control, contains the very seeds of its own destruction. The playbook of an organized killer is a chilling map of methodical evil. It's a drama of fantasy, planning, and execution. From the hunt to the con, from the act to the aftermath, every step is a deliberate move in their deadly game, fueled by a deep psychological void, a desperate need for power that can never really be filled. We've deconstructed this blueprint, not to be sensational, but to understand. Knowing the patterns, recognizing the phases of the playbook, the stalking, the luring, the control, demystifies their methods. This knowledge is a form of defense. It builds awareness of the tactics of manipulation and control. But the most important lesson is in the playbook's failures. The same arrogance and compulsions that drive them to create these scripts also lead them to make mistakes. They leave traces. They keep trophies. They taunt the world, desperate for recognition, and in doing so, they expose themselves. The stories of their capture remind us that, for all their cunning, they aren't supernatural. They can be beaten. Their meticulously planned narratives are brought to an end by diligent investigation, scientific progress, and their own human flaws. The playbook shows us how a monster thinks, but their downfall reminds us that they are, in the end, fallible. If this dive into the dark side of psychology hooked you, make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into the cases and the science that define this field. Have any thoughts? Or is there a case you want to discuss? Join the conversation in the comments below. Stay aware and stay safe.